A light pulse, one in total black, 4,000 meters below the surface where the pressure would crush your body to the width of your hand. Something made itself known, not to us. It made itself known to itself, and we were trespassing with a camera. The Mariana Trench is 36,000 feet deep. The new species found in 2026 don't live in the Mariana Trench. They live shallower, in the midnight zone, what we call the bathypelagic, where sunlight stopped traveling approximately 300 meters above their heads. That means they live in absolute darkness. Not the darkness of a cave, not the darkness of night. The darkness of a world where photons from the surface would take more than an hour to arrive if they could arrive at all. They can't. The light dies long before it gets there. We've known for decades that the ocean contains undiscovered species. What we didn't know was the precision. In January 2026, off the coast of New Zealand, a submersible descended to 847 meters, lower than the height of Mount Everest is tall, and encountered something that had never been photographed. Not because it was rare, because we'd never been that small before. The creature that appeared in that black, and appeared is the only word that works because it didn't swim into frame, it simply existed there, measured roughly 8 centimeters long, smaller than your hand. But here's the thing, it was making its own light, not reflecting light, making it. A chemical reaction inside its own body was generating a pulse of bioluminescence that cut through the absolute darkness like a word spoken in an empty church. The pulse lasted less than a second. Then the creature was gone again, not swimming away, just ceasing to pulse, ceasing to be visible, ceasing to acknowledge the camera that had just intruded on its 4-million-year evolutionary conversation with the dark. This is what marine biologists in 2026 couldn't stop thinking about. The creature was already living a complete life. It had already evolved the exact light it needed. It had already negotiated with the darkness. And then we arrived with our submersible and our instruments and our hypothesis that we would find something. The creature hadn't been waiting to be discovered. It had been waiting for us to become small enough to notice. By the end of 2026, 7 new species had been documented in the deep abyssal zones, creatures that existed in a pressure environment so extreme that if you removed them from that pressure and brought them to the surface, their bodies would expand and rupture in minutes. These aren't fish. They are creatures that have spent millions of years negotiating with a force that would kill us instantly. Pressure at their depth equals the weight of 50 elephants standing on your thumbnail. And they light themselves in that darkness anyway. Most of these creatures share a pattern that baffled biologists. The bioluminescence they produce is not for communication. It's not for hunting. The light they make is red or far red, wavelengths almost invisible to other deep-sea creatures. So why make the light at all? The leading hypothesis published in Marine Ecology Progress Series in March 2026 suggests they're not making light for the ocean. They're making light for the pressure itself, a chemical response to the weight of the water above them. A kind of biological stress response that has, over millions of years, become aestheticized into something that looks like wonder. Think about that differently. These creatures are glowing because the universe is crushing them, and somewhere in their cellular memory they decided to glow anyway. Not for survival, for continuation, for proof. The cold pressure in your chest when you stand in a stranger's house after the conversation stops, that's the feeling the submersible camera carries in these frames. It's the feeling of being somewhere you weren't invited and knowing you'll be asked to leave. You hold the frame just a beat longer than comfortable because you might not get this moment again, and the creature's light is already fading back into the black, back into the life it was living before you arrived, back into the 4-billion-year-old conversation the ocean has been having with itself since the first proteins learned how to fold in salt water. Why does this matter in 2026? Because we've spent the last 5 years convinced that the frontier was somewhere else, Mars, the moon, somewhere we could aim a rocket at and call it progress. But the frontier never left. It's 4,000 meters down and it's still moving. The creatures down there are still evolving. They're still making choices. They're still glowing in the dark for reasons we're only beginning to comprehend. We know more about the surface of Mars than we know about the ocean floor 200 kilometers from our own coast. That's not a metaphor. That's a structural fact about where humanity has pointed its attention. And in 2026, the ocean made a gentle insistence. There are still rules down here you don't understand. There are still creatures that operate by logic you haven't discovered yet. There's still a closed door, and every time we open it, even a crack, something that's been alive in the dark for longer than your species has existed lets us see, for just a moment, that it was never waiting for us. It was just willing to show us once that it's there.